This is the Valley, a vanished world from a forgotten time. Here on the Welsh borders, a farm is being run by 5 hand-picked experts, as it would have been nearly 400 years ago. Using only resources available in the year 1620, they are labouring for a full calendar year, turning the clock back to rediscover a way of life from an age gone by.
It's July and it's our 11th month working on the farm. 400 years ago, they would have been entering the busiest period of the year. Harvest time, 2 months of solid labour. We've got the first of the soft fruit ready to bring in. Red currants, white currants and, of course, gooseberries. Now that summer's here and the weather's warmed up a lot, it's good weather conditions to get out and get some of that laundry done. The grass is ripening nicely out in the fields, and at the period, this would have been a time when it was crucial to get the grass cut, made into hay, and back into the barns.
July's biggest challenge will be cutting down all the hay in the meadow. Tim Kohler of English Nature, who's been hay harvesting by hand for over a decade, has come to help Stuart, Alex and Fons.
I told you it's just like synchronised swimming. Got some plum or something trying to grow in the middle.
The bluebells of spring are now long gone, and the grass has flourished on this upland pasture.
There are a number of ways you can tell whether the crop's ready to cut or not. It's not so much a matter of how high it is, but you've got to look at the ripeness of the crop. This is hay rattle, because it's got these very papery capsules, and when those are dry and the seeds are starting to fall out, that's one way of telling that the hay is about ready to cut. And you can look at some of the other seed heads as well. This is a sweet vernal grass, and you can see that again, it's gone all papery and dry. And when the seeds start to drop out of that, that's when this stem starts to die off. And then you lose a lot of the goodness out of the hay at that point.
Harvest time is a job when everybody gets stuck in. It's not just the farmer and his servants, but this is the time when you start to employ the labourers, because you've got to make use of the good weather to get it down while you can.
Without a successful hay harvest, there would be no fodder to feed the farm's livestock.
There's no artificial foods at all for the animals in this period. So if they can't keep them going in the winter when there's no grazing for the animals, they'll lose the animals over the winter.
July brings the farm garden into full bloom. Everything is blossoming. The period gooseberry bushes are doing especially well, so Ruth and Chloe are busy picking.
People are a bit ambiguous, really, about fruit in the period. Fresh fruit, of course, can give you the runs, really, if you eat too much of it all at once, particularly if you've gone without for a while. And people sort of confuse the sort of diarrhoea that gives you with the sort of diarrhoea that kills people, or the flux, or the bloody flux, they used to call it. So many of the manuals of the period, the sort of health manuals, give advice that you should only eat cooked fruit, and particularly children should be kept off all raw fresh fruit, that they should sort of wait till they're about 10 and then a bit of well-boiled apple, to be safe.
We've got several different period varieties of gooseberries out here, red and green, and the green were riper earlier in the year. We used those for the pears in meat for the June revels. I actually prefer the red ones now, but the big fat juicy green ones that we had earlier were lovely.
There's lots of period recipes for gooseberries. Gooseberry fool turns up in loads of books, and so do various tarts and pies, and sauces for things like fish as well, particularly sort of the smoked and pickled fishes, which I suppose they'd make quite a nice sort of contrast.
Yeah, well, they're sort of nice
they?
and tart, aren't they? A bit like cranberries. Oh dear, look, I've burst that one. That's probably about it now, isn't it? I think we can
Yeah, probably enough. I'm going to do those beans.
Okay.
Fons and Alex have never done a hay harvest using period tools before, and it's taking time to perfect their technique.
I started off with a rather clumsy, quick-hitting style, forward defensive, but it's slowly changing into a kind of sand wedge. Just really trying to keep the blade as close to the ground as possible and parallel to the ground and get a nice, clean sweep. This is quite an effective little tool. The idea is I've got to spread the hay out as loosely as possible. So the wider the prongs, the sort of greater the spread. And when it's spread out like that, it should dry quicker. Come close to losing a couple of limbs standing behind this man. When he first started, I had to do a Scottish dance around his sword-like side.
Back in March, the team sowed some beans in the garden. 4 months later, and they're just beginning to sprout.
These are our Martock field beans. Goes right back to medieval times, this variety. And most of them, of course, you grow out in the field and then leave them in the pods until they dry out actually on the plant and harvest them as a dried bean. But I'm just having a few here, first few young beans that are developing in order to have some fresh. They're fresh, they're more like a sort of a broad bean really, quite nice. And dry, they're really nice through all the year in sort of soups and stews, potages is the old term. Or you can soak them and boil them and then refry them in butter and onions. That's my favourite way. Mind you, it gives you wind, but other than that.
Oh, they're still a bit small, aren't they?
They are a bit, yeah, quite sweet when they're young, right?
It's amazing the difference in the garden now. It was so bare and bleak in January, it was just miserable. There was nothing growing except a few measly cabbages. And now it looks like a jungle in here almost.
You all right over there? Finding any?
Well, I've got about 4 or 5.
Well, it's a bit early for them, isn't it?
After 5 hours of scything, the boys are about a third of the way through their 2-acre hay meadow. Farming manuals of the period reckoned that an experienced mower would be able to clear this meadow in a single day.
This is really starting to take hold now in the lower back.
Well, that's the thing, you use it as a pivot, don't you?
Yeah,
Food, guys!
In the reign of James I, hay mowers were paid about 10 pennies a day, 2pence more than a farm labourer normally received. But it was a long day, from about 5 in the morning to sundown, with just an hour for lunch.
This cheese is good.
I have a little bit, yeah.
It's not like shearers,
Top up your 8 pints a
Possum.
day.
whatever that's called. Possets.
Possum.
It's just an ordinary ale. You start drinking that strong ale, you're having your legs off, you're cutting around out there.
These apothecary roses just smell fantastic. They're a very ancient variety, Rosa gallica really. Beautiful, beautiful scent. They don't last long, you only get them for a couple of weeks and there's no repeat flowering, which is why, you know, people have bred modern roses. The main use for roses was in rose water, which you can use for cooking, as a flavouring ingredient, but also in cosmetics, both for its smell and sometimes also with crushed petals for the colour. Medicinally be made into little cakes with sugar for headaches, rose cakes. And then you might also eat petals just straight in a salad. Again, they sort of were thought at the time to help to sort of lighten the spirits, lighten the mood, a sort of period antidepressant.
As evening draws in, the boys still have hours of work ahead. But the long summer days mean they can pack in plenty more scything. Another bright July day in the valley. Time for Ruth and Chloe to get to grips with one of the major tasks for a 17th century farmer's wife, doing the laundry.
There was no washing powder as such, so the process has to start with making your own detergent. We're making lye. That's it, we've got stones in the bottom of this bucket, which has got lots of little holes in. Chloe's putting some straw in on top, and that's going to act as a filter. And then the main ingredient, the active ingredient really, is wood ash that we've collected from our fire. We've sifted it, so we've got a plain white, clean ash.
The ash produces a strong alkali which helps dissolve any grease in the laundry.
It's great to be using this ash. We've been storing it up after we cleared the fires out and cleaned the chimney, and it's been sat there waiting for us to use it. It's fantastic. We can just reuse everything on the farm.
To transform this concoction into a 17th century style washing liquid, they need plenty of water from the well.
And just strain it through very slowly. Just dribble it through. You don't want it all in one big whoosh.
Okay.
There we go, just slowly. We're getting some coming.
It's coming through now, beautifully.
Yeah. So you don't want it to go too fast because, you know, it actually picks up more sort of chemical content if it goes through slow.
After several days of sun, Stuart, Alex and Fons return to the hay meadow to begin the next process, turning the cut grass.
I never know where I've spread it. You know, you sort of move it around and then...
There's some of it's really quite green underneath.
Yeah. Haymaking is basically desiccation of the hay, drying it out so all the chemical and biological action in it ceases. Spread the hay out right across the field so it dries out as well as possible. All the period illustrations, the woodcuts of people haymaking, show a blazing sun, often very stylised in the background to make that point. So you literally make hay while the sun shines.
After a couple of hours, Ruth and Chloe's period washing liquid is shaping up.
It's coming out of sort of a greeny-yellow colour, which I didn't actually believe Ruth when she told me it was going to go that colour, because I thought it would just come out the sort of grey mush colour that the ash is. It's amazing, the smell. It's incredibly strong. It smells like boiled laundry when you leave your laundry in the dryer for too long.
Out in the meadow, the summer sun is still beating down.
I think this has got to be my favourite field. When we got in here in September, they'd finished the hay harvest, so it completely mown down. It didn't look like much. But now we've seen it, you know, growing. It's been covered in snow. We've had a snowball fight here. And now we get to spend all day here doing the hay harvest. It's not particularly physically stressful, but it's weird getting the technique.
Time for Ruth and Chloe to start the washing. Some clothes and linen sheets.
We're going to do a great big wash. 400 years ago, most people probably did, you know, sort of little bit day by day just to keep ticking over, and then a big wash, say about once a month. But if, however, they found something was really staying, they couldn't just go out and buy a bar of Vanish. What they used was their own urine that had been fermented, so it turns into ammonia. And we've got a bucket down here that's been sitting around for about 3 weeks. Honks to high heaven. That apron actually has got quite a nasty grass stain, so anywhere that's got stains on it, you just dip that little bit of stain into the fermented urine, and then that should bleach it out. So you can just poke it in and leave it.
Leave it there, yeah?
Yeah, you don't have to put your hands in it too much. We're just going to pour the lye over all this really greasy stuff. Right, just slowly.
It was possible to make bars of washing soap by boiling up the lye with animal fat and salt.
Of course, it would take a lot more time, and it would be more expensive because we'd have to use the fat. And we'd also, there's a possibility in the 1620s that you might actually be breaking the law. Charles I actually gave the monopoly on soap to one of his cronies as a sort of money-making measure. So anybody who wanted to make soap, technically, had to have a licence from this person who owned the monopoly.
The end of another long day in the meadow. The hay harvest has been a success, and so far, the team have been lucky with the weather. A new dawn on the farm, and with their laundry soaked in lye, Ruth and Chloe can head out to a nearby stream for the main wash and rinse.
Years ago, almost no one had running water in their houses. So if you've got the sort of a job to do that needs an awful lot of water, rather than using your well, it makes sense to bring the job to the water. So we're taking all this laundry down to the stream where we've got as much water as we possibly need.
They're quite hefty. We've carried them a fair way now, and I think Ruth's suffering more than I am. How are you doing?
I should be glad to get in that stream. I tell you, it's warm.
On a hot July day, it's an opportunity for Ruth and Chloe to have a refreshing paddle. Still early in the morning, and Fons and Alex are checking on the pea crop they sowed back in the spring.
It's been 2 months now since we sowed our pea crop in Triangle Field. And 2 months ago, we were working pretty much all of the day to clear out the bracken roots and the bramble roots from an area within Triangle Field to plant our pea crop in. But as the summer's kicked in, so have the roots. And we've got pretty much bracken everywhere, all over the field, and brambles pretty much everywhere, except, thankfully, within our pea crop.
Yeah, this has been, to date, our most challenging project, and it seems the challenge doesn't really stop here. We're still having to weed the pea crop.
A small amount of bracken has sprouted among the peas, but it's nowhere near as big or dense as the growth surrounding the pea field. All their hard work rushing this waste ground into use seems to have paid off.
400 years ago, they'd have taken about 3 years to turn a bit of waste ground like this into an arable field. And what they would have done is a technique called bracken bruising, which is effectively folding bracken stems over and crushing them. And this, over a period of time, will weed the bracken out slowly by causing a build-up in toxins in the plant, and then that's your problem solved.
Oh God, it's cold.
Down at the stream, the laundry needs to be dunked and soaked repeatedly, and then given a good bash.
Are you going to do alternate strokes? Yeah. I didn't actually mean to do that.
It looks pretty odd, this, beating the living daylights out of clothing. But if you think about it, it's just what you do in a modern washing machine, and the agitation drives the dirt out of the linen. It's violent, but it works really well. It'd be no good if there were buttons on anything, because you'd crush them to bits. So all the underwear and all the linens that are washed in this way are all tied with tapes and fastenings like that, rather than hard fastenings. Dunk, careful. We often find groups of women at places like this and streams doing their washing together. There's a wonderful woodcut of the 6 places where women were known to gather and gossip. And down at the stream doing the laundry is one of the ones pictured.
It's a bit like your modern day going down the laundrette. You sort of all meet up down there, get your laundry done, and then go off home. And it's I suppose it's a bit nicer, really.
Makes a
Fresh
hard
air
task much easier,
Yeah,
doesn't it? It goes much
it does.
quicker when
And
there's-
nobody likes doing their laundry. Right.
Yeah.
I'd say yeah.
Indoors, a hearty dinner is underway to reward the team's hard work.
We're into July now, and it's the times of plenty rather than the times of dearth. And we've got a lot of fresh material coming in from the garden now. Not just the normal green leafy things like lettuce and spinach, but also blues from borage flowers, pinks from the rose petals here, and fennel with that sort of very filmy sort of appearance it has. All of this is going to go into a salad later. But the key thing for tonight's meal is beef. By July, they'd had a couple of prime months in May and June when the grass was growing as fast as it ever does, and they were in perfect condition. One of the things they were looking for was for the cows to be as fat as possible. The fat was actually worth twice as much as the meat.
As well as being a valuable source of calories, animal fats also provided the oils and greases needed in a number of industrial processes.
We've got 15 pounds of beef in these 5 beef chops, and even at £1 of beef a day, which was what they were averaging, a pound of meat on these farms, that would have been well above the standard ration. I'm not at all sure that our crew are going to manage to get through this, so we'll probably be eating this cold for the next couple of days as well. The recipe I'm cooking today was written down on Monday the 14th of October 1644, and it was in the diary of a cavalryman during the English Civil War called Richard Simmons. And he calls it La Poignante sauce. So it should be really tasty.
Big one there.
Now that the hay has had a chance to dry out in the meadow, Alex and Fons can rake it up into cocks, ready for loading.
It's good that we laid it out in the rows and turned it a few times.
Well, it's just so much easier. If it's all out in rows, then you know one half of it's going to get nice and cooked in the sun.
Your piles all seem to be bigger than mine.
Do they?
Yes.
The original recipe called for oranges and lemons, pricey items at the time, but easily affordable to the gentry and a gentleman officer like Richard Simmons.
What I'm going to use is a few of our slightly unripe gooseberries out of the garden, which should give it that same sort of citrusy zing that he was so impressed by. In the whole of the Civil War, this was the only recipe he ever wrote down.
With the chops cut, they go into a cauldron with plenty of stale beer, a dash of rosewater, some gooseberries, and a selection of garden herbs. Then it just needs to stew over the fire.
What we're using, these are called battledores. They would come in all different shapes and sizes. I'm using it pretty much just like a cricket bat, but you use the waste of it to drive the swing onto the laundry. Seems to be working, but it's hard work. It's amazingly therapeutic. right up into
I think we lost our rhythm a bit
Do you know what
there.
this was? It's really cold.
Sorry. That's okay. Go, girl. Go on.
Right.
You get first splash.
The next dish I'm going to do is an icing pudding. And this comes from The Good Housewife's Handmade for the Kitchen. It's a early 17th century cookery book. And we start off with a good dollop there of oatmeal, and I've soaked that in hot cream for about 3 hours. Pinch of salt and a good pinch of saffron. That'll give it a nice yellow colour as well as giving it a bit of a flavour. It's the most expensive ingredient here. Everything else, very simple stuff that we can bring from around the farm. We need a couple of eggs, a little bit of chopped suet, put some fat in there. We're going to boil these in with our beef chops in beer, so it's going to soak up all those beery, beefy sort of flavours into it. Now the last thing I need to do is to stuff this mixture into the pudding casings. These are just animal intestines. They come in various sizes depending on the animal. This first one looks like pig. And in she goes. Making puddings in animals' intestines is very traditional. A number of modern dishes that have the word pudding in their title, like rice puddings and bread puddings, started off being cooked in the 17th century in animals' intestines, just as this is. A quick twist in the middle.
It's finally time to get the hay in. So Alex and Fons have called on their ex-pit pony Blackthorn to pull the hay sledge.
Well, Blackthorn.
That's great, Fons. The degree of importance these kind of animals would have had on farms 400 years ago, well, it just can't be underestimated, because Blackthorn has proved so useful. I mean, she really is. She's our tractor, she's our trailer, she's our Land Rover. She's pretty much everything on this farm. OK, forward.
Forward. Walk on. Okay. Nice, smooth run. Whoa. Whoa.
After hours of pummeling, Ruth and Chloe can relax a bit and start hanging out the laundry.
Mangles hadn't been invented in the 17th century, and obviously not tumble dryers either, so to get it dry, we first of all need to wring it out, and they often use something like this, a wringing post, which you can just twist the washing round. It means you don't have to have two of you to do it. In towns, there were often really quite sturdy ones, permanently in place, sort of as a town convenience. there's a really famous engraving of a map of London in the mid-Tudor period. That shows more fields, which were fields back then, and they were put aside for public laundry. And the map actually shows the ringing sticks, great big fat posts, because obviously they got quite a lot of use. Oh dear.
How are you doing in your one?
I think I'm about there. Yeah. Should we go and lay these out, and then we can bring the next couple?
400 years ago, it was common for people to spread their laundry on the fields or over bushes to dry and bleach in the sun. But they had to be ever mindful of thieves who tried to pilfer valuable clothing.
Okay, are you happy lifting it up, Fons?
Very much so.
Okay, well, I'll climb up there.
The team's first major harvest has been a long, hard-earned success. Now the hay can be stored away above the cowshed. Making sure that it's dried thoroughly is absolutely vital.
This may look like hay, but it's in fact a very dangerous substance. If it was wet, it would start decomposing, and it generates a lot of heat. And obviously the heat mixed with a bit of oxygen, a bit of fuel, can combust into a fire, and then we've lost our cowshed, which took us so long to build. And it's the best part of a couple of months' work, plus the hay harvest.
This is the part I've really been looking forward to, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to leave this farm having built this barn, put a roof on it, thatched it, filled up the inside, and we're going to leave it with a good loft full of hay for this next winter. So I'm really chuffed with this.
How's that going in?
Well, I'm packing it because the floor's not exactly...
It's not stable, is it?
Structurally sound floor. So I'm just packing in a layer for the floor.
We let Stuart build the floor, didn't we?
Yeah. Mind my hands with that floor.
I will do, I'll try.
With the hay safely stored, the Valley team can at last sit back and enjoy an evening of relaxation.
There's one chop each.
I'm hungry.
Get in
I
there.
see Fonzie's got his eye on that one on top.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go for it, Fons.
Go on then, go on.
Whoa, look at that.
Really hungry.
I'm going to get you else on your plate.
for half a cow.
Go on, just stuff it.
Any good?
Oh, very good.
Let's give it a go.
What have we got in these?
Oatmeal, cream, saffron, salt, and suet. Think of it as a sort of bread substitute.
Like haggis.
Well, it's like haggis, but without the meat. But by boiling it with the meat juices, then you got
So
some
it's
of that.
done in the meat juices.
Cook
Oh,
it in the same pot.
I know you
Thirsty, Ruth?
I am actually.
It's hard work.
It is just really hard work, and it's hot, isn't it? And you just don't realise you're not drinking enough. You keep working and working, and you think you're drinking lots, but you're not.
Beautiful.
The team's penultimate month on the farm has been a fruitful one. But the biggest and most important month is still to come. Next time in the valley, it's August, their final month. They've got to fatten up some geese. The wheat harvest is ready. Time to reap the crop they sowed a year ago.
This is the make or break point of the agricultural year.
The success of the entire project will depend on getting this right.